Hello, hello, everyone. It's Simone Ammons here again with you with another episode of Technical Writing Series with Technical Writer HQ. Today we have Ken with us, and I'll let him introduce himself, but be prepared. He does a lot in his work time as well as his free time, including being a firefighter. So, Ken, please introduce yourself. What do you do, and then what do you do?
Yes, thank you, Simone. So my name's Ken Swearengen. I am a technical writer with a company called CoderPad. And basically, what we do is we have a platform that allows companies to interview software developers, data scientists, any kind of technical role. We have a platform that helps you hire them. I've been doing it I've been with CoderPad for about 2 years now. Before that, I was with financial payments company called One Inc. And before that, I was a software developer. Firefighting is my most time-consuming hobby right now, other than taking care of my kids. And I do that as a volunteer with Baltimore County. So I've been doing that for about almost 6 years now.
Oh wow, that reminds me. In Baltimore, were you involved in the response when the bridge collapsed in Baltimore? Were you part of that response team at all, or?
No, we did. I do know some people who were on that.
Oh,
So some of our volunteers also volunteer other stations who are closer
okay,
to the bridge.
okay, okay,
And then we have the search and rescue team for our
okay,
county is just north of the station next to ours, so they sent a team down.
okay, okay. My heart still goes out. There's
Yeah.
such a tragedy. So you say technical writer, you say software developer, but actually your academic, your first degree is not in technical writing or in software developer. So walk us back to that first undergrad and how you got to that point.
Sure. So if you would have said that I was going to be a technical writer in my career, I don't know that I would have laughed, but I don't think that would have been on my radar. When I first started my undergrad, I was planning on majoring in psychology,
Mhm.
and after about a semester of that, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. So, because I had taken a philosophy course and I found that extremely fascinating, so I ended up getting a degree in philosophy with a minor in German, and my intent was to go to grad school and be a philosophy professor. So I went to grad school. I studied in Ireland for a year and got my master's degree in philosophy. And at that point, it
Wow.
was 2008, 2009, and the economy had tanked. And I love philosophy. It was great for my writing skills and for just my personal growth. But I didn't want to I didn't love it enough to be unemployed. Um, so I ended up moving back to Baltimore, and I got a degree. I got a job as a copywriter.
Okay.
So they focus mainly on financial publications. So I did copywriting with them for a couple years. Then they wanted to start a health content newsletter, and I still have an interest in health. So I ended up getting a short certification in personal fitness training
Okay.
and Pilates,
Okay.
um, and again another hobby thing.
Okay.
So I wrote the headline, or as a senior editor for their health newsletter. And then, as another point in my life, I have midlife crises about every few years, every 5 years or so.
Tell me about it.
So I took career tests, and IT stuff kept popping up. So
Mm.
I went back to school and got a bachelor's degree in information systems and technology management,
Nice, nice.
and thinking I wanted to be a network engineer, and ended up becoming a software developer with an insurance
Okay,
company.
okay, okay,
So I did that for 5 years. And then I had a chance to move into a managerial role
okay.
with a benefits company. That didn't end up working out. I was during COVID. So I ended up losing my job. And that's kind of where I took the time to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I was thinking to myself, well, I have all this writing experience and I have all this software development experience. So why don't I look into technical writing? And kind of what I had found was, even before I kind of got into the software area of technical writing, was that I was getting all these interviews because of technical writing interviews because of my software development background.
Nice.
Um, so that's what ended up happening. So I've been doing that for 3 to 4 years now. I did it informally as a software developer. I
Okay,
wrote a lot of our documentation just because I had that background, but
right.
um, I love it because I get to play with new things and test out new things, and then I get to tell other people or show them how to use these things, which are like kind of my strengths in life.
Right, right. I love that. So you said Pilates. Are you a Pilates instructor? Do you use it in your firefighting training? Like, how does that, or is
I
it?
don't. No, that was just like I did it to kind of get a little bit of what do you call it? Like cred, like
Okay,
street cred
okay,
for the newsletter I was writing.
okay.
But no, I haven't done it. I did it for maybe about a year. I would kind of some of the people in our office. I'd have like stretch breaks, kind of just get everybody up and moving. So I'd do it then,
Nice.
but I haven't done it in ages.
Nice. So then you talked about even in your software developer role already starting to dabble a little bit into technical writing. So as a software coming, because a lot of the technical writers who listen to us are also working in software companies. So as a software developer yourself, what are the key things you're looking for when you're looking to work with a technical writer? Are there any stupid questions? I hate to say it like that, but what are the things you think a technical writer needs to have under their belt or play with before they even come to you and ask you for help with like writing a document?
Yeah, just kind of knowing what a software developer is looking for in
Mm,
documentation. So if you know how to code, that's already one step in that direction.
yes.
Um, so for me, when I was software developing, and I don't do much of it anymore, but I still
Right.
will dabble around with some of our like the stuff in our product.
Right.
Just being able to copy code quickly. So instead of somebody explaining why the code works, I just want to be able to copy a snippet sometimes and just plug it in and know that it works and know that there's minimal customization involved. So just mainly knowing how to reduce the workload on software developers for them to get your product up and running.
I see. I see. And then as far as the interaction, when you are working with a technical writer, do you prefer they just ask you millions of questions, or do you prefer like when they would have like maybe a rough draft together and then you're just filling in the blanks because you're as a developer and when you were that was a very busy like time consuming role. Like what sort of interaction do you like to see? Do you prefer?
As a software developer or as a
Yeah,
technical writer?
as a developer.
Um, So yeah, it's hard because I'm on both sides of that equation. So I still work with
Ah,
software engineers. Yeah. So what I find is I try to do most of the heavy lifting myself. So
ah,
again,
okay,
kind of knowing mostly how the code works. Now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's over my head.
right.
So like I kind of try to approach the relationship to them as if I'm like a junior developer, right? And they're a more senior developer. So as long as I come into that relationship. Um, with a basic understanding of how code works. I'm when I'm documenting this stuff, I'm not really documenting like a lot of the processes in the software itself, right? So most of it, in my experience, is API documentation, which
Right.
is, we're handing this off to developers, and all they're interested in is what do I need to send over and what do I need to get back from this, right? So
Yeah,
when I'm talking with our developers, that's most of my conversation is like
gotcha.
what fields do you need from me or from our users, and what are you going to send back? Um, so
Gotcha.
you don't need to have like you don't need to be like the best software developer in the world. I am certainly not. But just knowing, how kind of that data processing works with software development, I think would give you a heads up.
I love it. And there's a keyword that you use there, the relationship with your SMEs or whoever that you're working with. I think that's important because I think a lot of times, and I've said this before, like people think as a technical writer, like we just have a computer and we go. But a lot of times it's establishing that relationship with others, especially within a team. If you're a solo technical writer with a team outside of you, within your technical writing team, and of course with your SMEs. So as a technical writer, now we've made another transition over. So and you're doing firefighting and Pilates and all of this. As a technical writer, when it comes to like capturing the essence, like you said, you already know developer only wants to see what do I need to call, what do I need to get back to get this API document and move on. How do you use that to inform how you develop content, knowing it's just short and sweet and to the point?
Sure. So it boils down to what's the simplest way I can explain this to somebody and get
Mm.
them set up as quickly as possible. And I think that goes not just so a lot of our audience is non-technical as well.
Ah,
So something I try to do is, our product is very visually focused. So I try to take a lot of screenshots and minimize that text that they have to read through. Other than, if there's something in the screenshot's not going to explain, I'll do that in some text. But so yeah, that's the main thing.
Okay. And then have you found that people, I've like, I read some blogs on like copywriting where you write for skimmers. And then have you found that in your writing, not just using the pictures, but annotating the pictures, making sure the pictures actually follow the same sequence of like log in here, click on here. Have you used the same sort of infrastructure when you develop that documentation?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're talking about developing for skimmers, one of the things I try to do, because I'm a skimmer when I read documentation. I am absolutely. So maybe that's who I write for. But so, drawing people's attention to the right thing so that they're not distracted in those screenshots or images. So I do a lot of like adding arrows and boxes and blurring things out, because I want their attention. I want them to be able to quickly see and draw their attention to what they need to do in order to move to that next step.
Right, right. I love it. I love it. So last week we were talking to somebody who said she'd worked solo as a technical writer. She's worked like in the bigger like Oracles and AWS in a team of technical writers. What has been your experience so far? Have you mostly been a solo or in a team? And what are the pros and cons would you say of either?
Sure. So with One Ink, my previous company, I was on a team of 3.
Okay.
And then with CoderPad, I'm the only copywriter, only technical writer. So far, which I prefer, a little both. Now with CoderPad, it was manageable with just me, or is manageable with just me, just at the pace of our product lifecycle and development. With One Ink, the product was a bit bigger. The company was a bit bigger too, and so they were releasing stuff more often. So they needed the 3 of us. But it was nice to have other people who had that product knowledge to be able to just kind of check me. So again, it's not with One Ink or with CoderPad. It's not much of an issue because I still have that, but it's just with the product managers and sometimes the software engineers. So I do like kind of being able to work at my own pace, which is a benefit of being the sole technical writer.
Right.
So yeah, they each have their benefits. If I had to pick, I kind of prefer being the sole technical writer. There's a little bit more glory.
I got you. But on that note, though, as a solo, sometimes you walk in and there is no structure, there is no documentation repository, there is no business process systems. How do you step into like that gray area and still be successful? Because the output is still documentation, some sort of content on the back end. How do you balance that?
Yeah, so that's my favorite. So one of the things I like the most about technical writing, I like taking their various documents that they have and like making a coherent website that people can use. That's my favorite part. Is I like building it from scratch. So kind of what I do with said both One Ink and CoderPad, they had documentation. It just wasn't flushed out. With CoderPad, a little bit after I joined, or a little before, they had merged with another company that had a different product. So one of my first jobs with CoderPad was merging this documentation together and giving it like a similar brand, a similar voice, kind of redoing the information architecture, making sure, eliminating a lot of redundancies. Because when you have a bunch of different people working on it, of course, information will get copied accidentally. Yeah. So kind of what I would do, I would use the product and I'd mentally make a model of like, this is how I would organize the documentation, like kind of start with like the main features and then break it down from there.
Okay.
And then kind of just work with the product managers. I'd send them a copy of the information architecture and be like, well, how does this look? Am I missing anything? Then I'd start to kind of draft everything up, usually do rough outlines. And then again, I like that feedback loop. I think that's very, very important, is knowing how to ask for and receive feedback from any of your subject matter experts, your product managers, your customers. Once the product goes live or the documentation goes live, I work with our customer success team to make sure that any questions they have about the documentation, whether it's a typo I made. Hopefully that never happened. Gaps in information, things I just
Right,
didn't think about, or the product managers didn't think about that we could answer for our customers that will ultimately help reduce that burden on the customer success team.
right.
So, they can spend their time answering harder questions and not questions that could be answered by
On the
documentation.
documentation. There was one thing you said that really made me pause. You said you present the information architecture to like the product manager team. So you didn't say I presented the revised document. The first thing you said was the information architecture. This is how I'm thinking about the document. Can you dive a little bit more into that? Because you're saying you're presenting like the thought process almost before you do the thing. Like walk me through that.
Yeah, so kind of what I do is I'm old school. I'll make an outline, right? So I do
Mm,
like the Roman numeral one. I'll
yeah.
create I'll create my major divisions, which is for us at least now is our two main products, and then we have a candidate section.
Uh-huh.
And then I'll break down the products into the main features or the main use cases, kind of depending um, on what the subject matter experts think and what how our customers interact with the product.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, so it's at that point when I'm trying to just I'm just like throwing ideas at the board. So I don't really. This is more of a brainstorming activity than like a discernment activity.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I throw everything on there that I think should be on there, and then at that point, I kind of use the feedback to reduce that list into like kind of like core features, um, and make sure also that I'm not missing anything.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
and
mm.
so it's a constant like I'll brainstorm. Hey, how does this sound? All right. Okay, let me flesh this out a little bit more. All right, how does this sound? And then kind of just keep that cycle up. Usually about like cadence is usually about once a week. I'll reach
Okay.
out. Um, yeah.
Okay, I love that. I love that. There was another technical writer who spoke about the same thing, information architecture, getting that lay of the land sort of figured out first before you just like start writing, you know. And then a question I always ask the people that we join on the webinar is, what are your favorite tools? Like I spoke to somebody recently, 30 years in the game, 36 years in the game. With all the software coming out, even AI, what are the tools that you found have accelerated your pace, your output, your productivity, and your output? And what are some of the tools you'd rather like not have to mess with? Like, what's your take?
That's a good question. For software documentation, it's a platform. I really like README.
Ah,
I think it's readme.io.
okay.
It's got integrated, like they integrate API documentation, so they make it really easy to integrate to document APIs, including like
Oh,
easy to
nice.
copy snippets. You can select language you want for the snippet and copy that. Again, going back to like what I like as a software developer, I like being able to like click my language and click the
And,
snippet and just
and
plug
move
and
on.
play.
Got
Um,
it.
that one I love. The other really the tool I could go on about is Snagit, which I use for
Huh.
screenshots, like
Ah,
marking up the screenshots, and then very rough videos and GIFs.
okay.
So I am not like a video editor by any means. I can't do like any of the fancy um, like transitions between like the different shots, but uh,
Right.
I know enough where I know some people are very extremely visual learners and like prefer videos over text and pictures. So I'll use Snagit to create videos for them and demonstrations to go over the product.
Hmm,
And
hmm.
I can edit it. It usually takes the easy part's recording. The hard part is removing all my ahs and ums and the delays and me figuring out what I'm going to say. But Snagit, like I love their markup. That's the one I was telling you. I can do arrows. I can do highlighting. I can do like page breaks. So and it's cheap. It's like I think it's a one-time purchase of $60, which is like rare for software. Usually it's a subscription fee. So
Right, 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 right.
um,
Wow, I love it. I love it. So in your work process, when you do, you talked about sending information back and forth with your product management team or SMEs. What software do you use there? Are you all like in Confluence or SharePoint, Google Docs? Like what is that communication platform to actually document your changes?
sure. So we do mainly Asana and Slack.
Okay.
Yeah, so Asana we use to keep track of the tickets and the progress and most of the conversation. And then occasionally we'll use Slack just for like the more in-depth stuff or async stuff.
Gotcha.
And then like a lot of companies, we use Zoom for all our calls where I need to actually talk to somebody and have them walk me through stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting now. A lot of technical writers are saying like their tech stack, so to speak, is becoming higher and higher. Like I feel sometimes we're moving away from just the craft itself of
Hmm.
writing, but it also enables a lot more collaboration between people. Like you said, you have people in France and overseas and different countries. It allows collaboration that probably wasn't that didn't exist like even like 10 or 5 years ago. So that's really good to hear. So as we try to wrap up here, through your career, philosophy, copywriter, firefighter, software developer, technical writer, technical editor, we'll even talk about that for a little bit. What high points, low points, any bits of wisdom you want to share?
Yeah, I said the absolute high for me is when I get to play with the product and create the documentation from scratch, whether
Mm,
I was doing it as a software developer or with CoderPad. There's just something about like, the reason I have a million hobbies is because I'm so curious and I like to do everything and I like to get in and play with everything. So
right,
being able to go in and play with some code or play with a product and be like, oh, this is cool, and like discover features. And then that, to me, that gives you that fresh perspective that most of your users are going to have, right? A lot of your users are coming in not knowing the product as well as you do because they're going to be using it for the first time. So when you
right,
use that product as the first time, you get that extremely helpful perspective and knowing how to communicate what they're looking for. Because versus somebody who's used the product for a while, there's going to be a lot of stuff they miss that they're going to assume that the reader or user already knows.
right,
So
right.
that's the absolute high point for me, is knowing I can have that impact on people who are using the product for the first time. Um, no.
Yeah, I think that's incredible because you said you actually have a software developer background. So sometimes I worry if you because you might figure it out or pick it up faster than most maybe because of your software developer background. I love that you're saying that you're still explicit in making sure it is for that first time user, like when you're writing a documentation. So how did you develop that mindset though, that making sure even though you may see the code and recognize it and know what to do, but then somebody else who's a non-technical user might struggle more. How do you balance your software, that expertise with like making sure your non-technical first-time user also can get on board?
Sure. So for me, that's a lot especially when so that's where the feedback comes in a lot.
Ah, okay.
Um, so I'm actually on the marketing team versus the product team where I was previously and where I think most
Really?
technical writers are. So they're not nearly as technically involved in the product as I am, or as technically advanced,
Yeah.
which I'm not. So having their perspective and their feedback helps a lot. And then just honestly, since I haven't coded in such a long time, I've kind of feel like I've gone back to that like low, the more junior level.
Yeah.
Um, which is actually kind of nice because, again, not just for the perspective, but because it makes it more exciting for me when I get
Mm,
to learn new coding stuff that even stuff I learned years ago when I was in my old job. I forgot it, so I'm like, oh, I remember
right.
this now. So it's kind of like, because I focus more on writing now and less on the software development, it's kind of like ingrained in me that to focus kind of more on the that like beginner level of like audience focusing.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. So as we're about to wrap up, any last minute words of wisdom, words of advice for somebody entering the technical writer for that journey? Any words of advice for them?
Yeah, just be willing to learn and be curious. If you're the kind of person who likes to do everything or has a lot of hobbies or just like learning about any topic, if you spend hours on Wikipedia or on Reddit, like going down
Yeah,
the rabbit hole, I think you'd be great because you have that curiosity to want to go learn something. And then once you get some practice of like writing about it, I think becoming a sufficient or good technical writer isn't that far of a leap. I think the curiosity is the most important thing, and then um, learning how to communicate what you're learning about should come naturally, especially if it's something you're excited about.
I love it. I love it. So curiosity, being excited about it, being passionate about it, even like you said, stepping down the developer rung as a junior, feeling like a junior developer, but using that to actually inform your technical writing. So it feels like every part of your journey, you've just used it to sort of revamp and reinvigorate everything that you're doing from a technical writing perspective for that first time end user. I think that's great. I think that's great. But Ken, thank you so much for these insights. I am exhausted thinking about all the things that you do. And did he mention he has two kids as well, like under the age of 10? So he is a busy man. But with technical writing, it looks like you've been able to enjoy all of your, your after your extracurricular activities as well as really enjoy, the curiosity that you can develop at work, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, and appreciate the opportunity to be on and talk with you today, Simone.
Yeah, absolutely. We always welcome the best and the most energetic technical writers on this platform. Thank you so much. So, everyone, join us again. Well, next week we'll be taking a break for the July 4th holidays, but we'll be back on in mid July for another series. But we want to thank Ken for taking the time out on this lovely Friday afternoon. I don't know how lovely it is in Baltimore, but it's a really sunny day out here. Not hot, but just sunny day out here in Philadelphia. And we will talk to you soon, Ken. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
All right, you too. Thank you, Simone.
All right, bye.
Bye.